we bounced around for a lot of years, and the Medina facility is actually much nicer than the Holiday Inn ever was, and there's an adjacent hotel, so that works out really well. And of course, in the pre-internet era, RadioFest was almost a week-long event, and now it's sort of a day and a half. And of course, the big deal is the auction on Friday night, and the swap meet on Saturday, and obviously we don't have a way to kind of police the parking lot, so to speak, and I'm not sure we desire to, but most people don't start selling stuff till Saturday, but there's people out there doing things before that. It's basically a swap meet. One of the things we've seen as a trend is that our talks have become attended than they ever were in the past. So we're seeing a shift towards people interested in the history. We had 3 standing room only and had to turn away people talks last year. We actually had already booked a larger room for the presentations this year. But of course, obviously we had to cancel this year because of the COVID thing. In Illinois, we're in a 5-step, go back to normal program. Step 4 actually starts tomorrow, which allows limited internal restaurants and various things. But to do something the size of RadioFest, you have to be at step 5. And step 5 really says there's a cure, or it went away all by itself. I mean, it's got to be that level. So we don't expect to see anything happening this year. And of course, being near a large metropolitan area, as I know some of you are, Chicago has one of the biggest density problems of the virus. Out here in the burbs, it's pretty transparent to us. We just walk around wearing silly masks and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the quick overview. The one thing I will say that has absolutely died at RadioFest is the contest. Years ago, we had contests that were fabulous. People brought in great things to show. Whether they got them judged or not was kind of irrelevant. Now it's hard to get people to bring anything out, and we're kind of attributing that to the age of our membership. Schlepping things is not easy. And younger people, of course, radio as a technology, I don't mean to blow your bubbles out there, and please take it the right way, but my kids listen to streaming audio. They don't listen to radio, okay? My oldest son will flip the radio on if he's in the car sometimes, but it's not his primary source. And so even though kind of FM kept radio alive from a collectability viewpoint, now even FM is kind of passé. So mass media, like mass production, is kind of a thing of the past. So, and we're also seeing, especially at the auction, the more artsy a radio is, the more money it brings. So functionality is no longer important. It's, does it fit in with something that looks really cool? And so, there's always been an element of that, but it just seems to be bigger and bigger. The same radio in a better looking cabinet in equivalent condition brings more money. So that's the 2-second version. I don't know if you guys, I don't know how many of you have actually been to RadioFest in the past. It's been going on almost as long as the club has been around. And so I don't know if you have any questions, comments.
Well, do you recall, Tom, what the subjects were on those 3 presentations that you didn't have a big enough room for? When you said you had more folks who'd like to come in than you could let in for the presentations.
Yeah, we had a fellow talk. Yeah, Kent King talked about Art Deco Scott radio cabinets. We have a retired fellow from Shure Microphone. As you know, Shure is headquartered in the Chicago area, basically focusing on the Elvis mic, which has all kinds of following to it anyway. And I'm using that phrase, so I can't remember the model number. And I'm trying to remember the third one. We always do something on audio, and I don't know what the theme was this year. It may have been how to tune up your phonograph in a nauseous detail, set of it right kind of thing. We also have a ham forum often as part of it, and we do set up a ham station out in the swap meet area with vintage equipment. So we have that aspect as well. But like I said, all 3 of the formal things were standing room only. The previous year, one of our members built kind of a killer crystal set where he put in notch filters to get rid of all the 50,000 watt stations in Chicago and shielded the whole thing. And he was DXing all over the place, and then all of a sudden they started experimenting with digital AM in Chicago, and that really messed him up because that was between, the analog channels. But since it didn't really work as far as a marketing thing goes, they abandoned it and shut it down. And so now he's able to do it again. And so his big focus was the fact that you need a diode with the minimum amount of forward drop. You really don't care what kind it is. And so he focused on that, answered a lot of questions. But this doesn't look like your typical toilet paper roll with a bunch of wire around it. And so there's a variety of things interest-wise that people have come to the talks about.
Now, one other thing I'd be curious about, Tom, if you could just lay it out for us. I know there's sort of a sequence of events. It ends with a banquet with some entertainment, I think, still. And you have
Friday. Yeah, Friday we have the main auction, as I mentioned, and that the setup for that starts mid-afternoon. And one of the things we did last year, which worked out really well, and we weren't sure how it was going to go. Sometimes auctions can go till midnight, 1 in the morning, and we start losing audience like crazy. So instead of having a limit of 10 items per individual, we knocked it down to 8. And then we put a cap on the total number of items. And we weren't sure if that was going to kill the auction or not. It turned out it made the auction much better. The quality of the stuff that was there, people got even more selective. So, even though there may be a box of tubes that's worth, the minimum $30, people didn't bother to put it in. And that made it so we were dealing with things that were of a higher caliber. And so the thing ended at a reasonable time. Because I usually help with cleaning up the auction. If you get out of there at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, you're usually a hero. And it's like, we're getting too old for this stuff. It's not fun anymore. And so that's Friday. Saturday, like I said, is swap meet. The presentations are staggered throughout the day. We run our donation sale. We used to run just a donation auction, but we ended up with so much stuff. And in days of yore, when we were doing multi-day meets, we have to either cover it all up or scoop it all up. And then we had some people that decided that theft was a good idea. And but rain is our biggest problem. You take something that's marginal and you turn it into absolute trash once it gets rained on. So we have a flea market style sale all day, and people are donating things during the course of the day as it goes along. So we end up being kind of a popular location. People keep coming back. And then around 4 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon, we have an auction to auction off the rest of the equipment, of which that usually gets rid of half of what's left. And then we do a progressive, everything for $5, everything for a couple of bucks, everything for $1. And then of course we wait for the super cheapskates where everything is free. And one of the things we've noticed from a social aspect on the free side is a lot of people snarf stuff right away, but a lot of people won't. So we leave it out overnight and then call 1-800-JUNK in the morning because it's cheaper than getting a dumpster. And usually we pay the minimum because that's all that's left. If we actually have these guys come Saturday evening and pick stuff up, there's a lot more stuff to pick up. And then of course you can't ever get it back once it gets recycled. So people like the anonymity of nobody standing there watching them when they take free things. I guess it's sort of like dumpster diving when you're looking over your shoulder. So it's sort of an interesting social experiment. The other thing that's funny is I'll have people that say, I couldn't get $10 for this thing on my table, but you auctioned it off and you got $15. And, the media or the venue has a lot to do with what people are willing to pay for things sometimes. So if there's the illusion of competition or just this, the frenzy of the whole auction thing, not that we're too frenetic about it, but it seems to change people's behavior. And so obviously you can't predict which way it's going to go, but sometimes it goes that way.
Now, one of the other things, Tom, that the group might find interesting is when you mentioned the auction, they actually have a professional auctioneer who comes up and does this for them. He's a gentleman from Texas.
Yep.
And I don't know if he's an officer any longer down there, but he's also very active in the VRPS, which is the Vintage Radio Phonograph Society of Texas. So he's been doing this now for how many years? And he seems to get excellent results. And where he knows quite a bit about the radio, he puts a little spin on it too. So it's not just simply a card,
No, Jim Sargent does an excellent job, and he's probably been doing it for us at least 5 years. I can't give you the exact number of years. And graciously, he volunteers his time to do that. He doesn't charge us to do it.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
And he's a very nice man. And the thing that's really good is if the description the person put on the thing is lacking some key piece of data, he'll throw it in. You know, so if somebody has a model XYZ radio and they forgot to tell you that it's got a double conversion in it, you'd say, by the way, this is a double conversion receiver, and it's also got, you know, 3 left-handed smoke deflectors in it, and you should buy one of these things. And the other thing is, he's a good auctioneer from a moving along viewpoint. We don't linger on stuff. So he keeps the pace at something reasonable that people can follow. And as you mentioned, he's a very personable guy and very knowledgeable. So that just makes it a really nice package. We've actually partnered up with the Wisconsin Radio Club because the president of the Wisconsin Club actually runs all our computer tracking of everything that goes on at that auction. And so we've got kind of this core team of people that make the auction much smoother than it was in years past when it was all done on paper.
Tom, any idea what the number of folks that you see at this is in the course of the weekend? What do you have for attendance? Any ballpark estimate?
Well, the answer is hundreds, and I would guess, 300 over the course of the weekend would be a reasonable guess. I don't have the actual data. But as far as numbers go, I believe we had a record RadioFest auction with Jim Sargent last year, grossed about $40,000.
Wow, very good.
And our donation sale usually goes around 1,000 to 2,000, usually closer to the 1,000 end.
Which helps the club.
Right, because when we do, you mentioned, I forgot to add to it, we have a banquet on Saturday night, and we usually have entertainment. And we have to buy a minimum number of meals. We have to pay the entertainment. That's never a break-even proposition. So, a good chunk of the money that we raise in the donation auction and for registration that doesn't cover the cost of the venue helps cover the cost of that banquet event.
What I was most curious about is I know that you folks had a group of 3. I believe they do sort of a Andrew's sister tribute one year. And Olin Schuler, the president, they came right up to the president and get him in the show. I mean, that's enough to make me run for a higher office, if we could get something like that up here. Now, Tom, I took the liberty. This is going to be from your 2015 RadioFest, and I think Zenith was your theme. So if John can walk me through this here, I'm going to try to share my screen here.
Right. See right in the middle of your bottom of the bar.
And maybe you will see some things that look familiar here. Okay, and let me get to the screen that we're going to look at.
All right.
And we'll get this box slid over here. So, John, are we there?
Not yet.
All right, I'm not doing something right here, probably. Let's see.
If they had a tuning knob on, it'd be a lot easier.
Here we go. How about this? There we go. Something is happening here, I think. Or is that me? No, that was me. Sorry.
I've got up on my screen that I want to share with you guys. So.
Yeah. So if you've selected the share screen, it's the green icon in the center, and then you can select the window which you want to share.
Okay.
So you just pick the window of this.
There we go.
See if anything shows up here. There we go.
Yes. So I don't have a mouse, so you have to bear with my big fat fingers here, So these are, I know you guys usually have a theme, and I think in 2015 there was a special Zenith display. So let's take a scroll through these and take a look. Here's a Walton Unknown Model Night Goodnight John Boy in beautiful shape. They kind of give the group an idea of some of the things. Anybody ever see one of these before?
Not me. This is beautiful.
That's actually a tiny Zenith designed by them for a children's room.
Whoa.
Bruce Phillips might be the guy to ask a question about that because they are rather rare and, not the best radio, obviously, just look at the size, but probably much like that little Westinghouse refrigerator. they're an interesting little item. And, you know, it's probably one of those things to look neat in the dealer's showroom when you went in there.
What's the dimensions on that, would you think, Paul?
Uh,
Trying to get scale here in my mind, whether it's like, you know,
I'd say if it's 8 to 10 inches tall, I saw somebody sell one once, but I don't remember a lot of details, like a lot of my life.
I think from a scaling viewpoint, that knob is probably just slightly over an inch in diameter.
Okay. All right.
So if you take that as a ratio, you know, it's maybe 10 inches tall.
Yeah, so I think about 10 to 12 might do it. Yeah.
That's a cool little set. And check this puppy out. Deluxe Chinese model. Now, I don't know, I know something about Zeniths, but even in some of the Zenith books that I've read, I've never quite seen anything like that. What would the error be? I mean, is that a custom cabinet you would request, or is that something that was actually a off the shop, you know, you could just, I'll take a model number 1, 2, 3.
Well, if you look at the radio dial and it's got a tuning meter at the top, not a tuning eye. So you're looking, you know, earlier 30s. And, you know, a lot of radio companies had a custom cabinet affiliation in some form or another. And maybe that's a custom, you know, a custom affiliate, or somebody went to Zenith, bought a radio, and then went somewhere else and had a cabinet made. That, you know, that could have happened too.
Because that thing is pretty awesome. I mean, regardless of its origin, you know, you see so many things that don't work out when people try to do their own design work. And here we have a prototype 1939 Zenith TV set with the mirror projection system.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And that is a nice item. And special stratosphere made for Commander McDonald's mother. Happy Mother's Day.
That's spectacular.
That's a beautiful piece.
The widower cologne is worth it. Forget about their even putting the radio aside.
And we have several very early looking Zeniths, as well as a couple of TOs there, as they got themselves started as communications as opposed to consumer sets. 1925 Zenith Super 8. Very sharp indeed.
Yeah, that's cool.
And Royal 500 in the presentation case. Those are the things that still tickle people's fancies, you know, with the booklet, with the tag, with the case.
Yeah.
Flashmatic remote control gun, 1955.
You guys know what that is, right?
Well, I'm taking it that it's one of the early remotes designed for Zenith TV.
Yeah, the black and white TVs up at toward the top of the set, they had 2 photo cells that were spaced pretty far apart. And you basically shot a beam of light at one to change the channel and one to change it either on or off or volume or something like that.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, and they quickly went to that ultrasonic clicker system after this, which they patented. But this is before that. This was what they thought was going to be the hot setup. But of course, you can't get too many features that way. You'd have to have photo cells and a big array all over the room if you wanted to do a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, and you still had to get up to turn the volume. Can you imagine? I mean, that's just. I wonder how reliable that device was in its day.
My guess is if somebody turned the room light on the wrong way, you all of a sudden.
And let's see what we get down here next. 1920s model radio phonograph. Just the cabinetry on these is just, my back begins to wrench just thinking about trying to load it into a car and bring it to RadioFest. And that's a pretty spiffy looking speaker there. Huh? That's a Zenith Marine Type 1 prototype. So who gets all this stuff out there? Do you have any guys who actually worked for Zenith? I know you had a few folks who worked for Motorola, and you know there's a few people in your club, Tom, who had affiliations with some of the companies out there.
Yeah, I'm a Motorola alum myself, but I worked on cellular telephone. The consumer electronics business was already sold by the time I started there. Yeah, one of the guys that's one of my good chums in the club was designing black and white TVs when he graduated from college at Zenith. And so, yeah, the guys that work on this kind of stuff, of course, aren't around anymore. But
well, if they found it in Grandpa's attic, the speaker, especially with the the Lightning Bolt Z, and it, boy, is what a shine, for something
Yeah,
from
oh, yeah.
1925.
Yeah.
And then we've got a 1925 super portable battery set. It probably weighs about 40 pounds.
Yeah,
But then it's
they're pretty rare.
in the day.
Yeah. And of course, it's the whole James Bond thing, 'cause it's built into a briefcase. If it wasn't for the knobs, you'd think you just had a suitcase.
Don't show up at TSA with something like that today. Going to
No, especially
RadioFest, you'd wind up in the clink.
Well, yeah, with those big round batteries in there, they think you'd have bombs or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Look like Burgess. And let's see, the World War II bomb proximity fuse.
Definitely don't take that to TSA.
Well, I mean, that was a big accomplishment for Zenith, and was quite a device in its day. I mean, I think, again, in today's world, you're talking about some of the younger folks who attend your meets. People don't understand the wartime contributions that these companies made. Let's see what else we've got here for Zenith. Oh, this is one of those sets your friend designed.
Yeah, a little bit before his time.
With a little TV topper advert there, and the round tube, I think, is sharp. That is a nice design.
Yeah, it is very aesthetically pleasing.
Very, what do you say, 1949, if I'm reading the top of that tag properly. Zenith audio meter calibration check unit.
And likely, Zenith made hearing aids for a lot of years, so that may have been related to that business.
Yes, they were actually quite big with that. If you check out, you go to like hearing aid ads, or you go to Zenith hearing aid ads, you'll find some of their ad copy, and that was a big thing
Zenith
for them.
At one time made linear power supplies for industry. They made medical equipment, the hearing aids. Of course, everybody knows they made computers for a while. So they were pretty diversified. They also bought the Rollin Tube Company because they made their own color television tubes. And they had plants all over Chicago back in the 40s and 50s, maybe back into the 30s. And of course, they all slowly got shut down, and they moved their headquarters to the suburbs. And then they got affiliated with LG, and LG ended up taking them over, and now the brand is gone completely.
And LG is just really Lucky Gold Star, but they renamed it LG because people didn't like the connotation that Lucky Gold Star was a inferior, low price, Far Eastern import, I guess.
Well, a lot of their early stuff was not exactly
was not that hot.
People get really scrunchy faces when you say the word Gold Star to them when they have the Gold Star brand.
Yeah, they didn't have a particularly great reputation. They were pretty much considered bottom of the barrel at some point.
There's a Model 1P prototype one-tube regenerative receiver with an early Z pointer on it. That's pretty cool.
Wonder why they never got into amateur gear.
I mean, they came from that. You would think that might be a logical expansion, though. You're right.
I don't think they ever got into transmitters. Colonel McDonald, he was the guy that drove the transoceanic. He wanted to be able to pick up shortwave, and that's why that product exists. And he ran the company, and what he wanted, he got. And in fact, just a sidebar about him, he had a huge estate way in the middle of nowhere back when he owned it back in the 30s.
Excuse me, is somebody unmuted there, John? Or are we getting some?
I think I muted.
There we go. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, well, he owned his own B-29. And
Wow.
he'd fly downtown. I'm sorry, I got the wrong guy. That's the guy that ran the Chicago Tribune, not the guy that ran Zenith. Never mind.
I know he owned a yacht, and he was part of a big program. If you were a top flying Zenith dealer in his day, is he would invite the executives from the different distributors and Zenith dealers, and they would get to go out. He would actually take them out on his yacht. Here's a very neat piece, and again, something, I don't know that you would find in any place but Chicago. Commander McDonald's snowshoes from the 1925 Macmillan Arctic expedition with a custom radio receiver built for the SS Peary. That's pretty cool.
That is really neat. Certainly one of a kind.
Chicago Laboratories Zenith. Now that's about the beginning of the company, right? That's
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they didn't become Zenith Radio. It became Zenith Radio Corporation, I believe, right after it was Chicago Radio Laboratories, and Zenith was the brand. And, you know, a lot of Chicago radio companies went down that road. Continental Television and Radio and Television had the Admiral brand, and later on became Admiral Corp. The Motorola brand was Galvin Manufacturing originally, and then it became Motorola Inc. And the same thing with Zenith. They went from Chicago Radio Labs to being Zenith Radio Corp.
Motorola used to make those Quasar TVs too, right? That was their TV
Oh, yeah.
brand. Quasar.
Yeah, I remember that. I had one.
Yeah, and of course, the trivia fact on Quasar was Motorola started working on the notion of spinning off their consumer electronics division in 1964. And they spun it off in 1974 to Matsushita, which is the parent of Panasonic.
Hmm.
They didn't want to give up in any way the Motorola brand name, so they invented the Quasar brand name so they'd have something to sell.
Interesting. Let's see here. We have a Chicago Radio Laboratory Zenith MC3. I mean, these are museum pieces, two little pieces of history. We've got Zenith type AGN 2 from 1919, 1920. You know, and the thing that strikes me is this stuff, this ancient stuff is in remarkably good looking shape. This is a Zenith radio alarm.
Oh, I like that.
That is a sharp look. Never produced. I wonder if that also had the plug outlet in the back where you could time your coffee pod and your, God only knows what. I mean, they did that on all the little clock radios. That was
Oh, yeah.
a little hook they used to do on that. Nice looking stuff. That is,
That's,
I like the graphics on that dial. I like that.
yeah, that's super sharp.
So all very well laid out. And again, now I know you guys usually pick a theme, like you've had an RCA, you've had a Zenith, and you try to do some displays that highlight a particular manufacturer. Now, one thing I've always wondered, is it really true that Zenith did have the world's largest one-floor radio manufacturing facility in the world on Dickens Avenue? I think they did.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know that fact.
I've seen aerial shots of it, and the thing is just absolutely immense. And just the thought of even organizing that from, you know, the purchasing agency to bring all the stuff in, sorting it, getting it on the lines to go out the door. I mean, in its heyday,
And
it had to be a heck of a place.
You know, back in the 30s, you're doing all that on paper.
Beautiful stuff. I know. No CAD cam.
Yep.
Very nice. All right, let's see if we get back to my meeting. Stop share. All right. Couldn't be any simpler. Well, thanks for that walkthrough in Zenith.
Well, you walk.
That was some nice looking stuff.
Walk along.
Well, you provided the local color.
Okay.
I'll do the play-by-play. You can be the color commentator.
Color commentary, yeah.
I have a kind of cool Zenith thing I could show if you gave me the screen.
Sure.
Go ahead. Go ahead and share, Hugh.
All right, just give me a second. Oops, it's on two different. I got two screens running. Hold on. Share. This. So this is that up?
Yes.
You see a bunch of pictures. Okay, see the chroma color things.
Yeah.
So those that was on the free table at the New Hampshire in Brookline.
You got to be kidding me.
and I saw it, and then I looked at the back of it, and you could see there's a light. You see this and a color wheel?
Yeah.
And so there's two color wheels. One is the outside that does the letters, and then the inside is yellow, but it has these black and clear stripes. So that does the word Zenith, and it'll shimmer. And I have a movie of it running. So, but the interesting thing about it, all of these plastic fibers that light up the letters up front have to be in order. So the colors move across the letters. So just think about that when the video plays. That's a Martin Logan speaker. All
Now,
right.
was that fully functional, Hugh, when you found that on the free table?
Pretty much. I put an
Oh my
LED.
gosh.
I put an LED light into it, and oh, there it goes. It's playing. You
'Cause I
see
never
it?
find those things.
Wow,
Now watch. Now
that's
Zenith is gonna shimmer. See how Zenith
Oh,
shimmers?
that's awesome.
that
Yeah.
is really cool.
Yeah. So it's probably the colors would be better if I didn't use an LED and used a a quartz light or something. But it's fun. It's in my garage. I turn it on every
And
once
those,
in a while.
the advertising collects in many cases, far higher premiums than a good Zenith radio. That
Mm.
There you go. It's it looks okay in these pictures.
it's
A
neat.
little
It's a
ratty.
piece.
It's a little rattier
It's
up
a little
close.
piece of TV history. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
There
Does
you
it
go.
from what,
Thank
the 60s, do we think? Or
Thank you for sharing that.
Well, fiber optics are going to be, in the late 60s, early 70s.
That's-
Yeah, I mean, they're really just plastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess they are fiber optics. They're acting like it, but I don't know if it's anything you transmit a phone call over.
Well, no, it's low grade stuff, but I remember that Ford, when they came out with their Mark III Lincoln in like 67, 8,
oh, sure. Uh-huh. Mhm.
they had little monitor lights that you could see in your rearview mirror right above the
Yes.
back window, which were tied back to all the tail lights to tell you if you had a burned out light bulb.
Right.
Yeah,
And that was, a trivial use of a plastic fiber just to make something snazzy to sell people.
Yeah,
I
no,
remember
exactly
signs
right.
like that all over Chicago. You'd go to any place that sold televisions and you'd see maybe not that exact sign, but certainly that chroma color logo and the Zenith. I don't know about where you live, but Zenith and RCA owned the color TV market back then. And that's all you ever saw advertised any place. And if you wanted to find something else, you had to really look for it until Sony came in and ate everybody's lunch.
Anybody else have any Zeniths or anything else they'd like to share with the group tonight? Projects you're working on? When Bruce disappeared, I got nervous because I thought he was looking for every Zenith in his house and he was going to bring them down. And I used to tell him, we don't have that kind of time, Bruce. There's quite a bit of stock back there.
I was just
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, this is I forgot I had it right here with me. It's a Hallicrafters. They were, or you can't see the dial that well. This is vintage about 1964. It's a WR 2500. Probably one of the last radios that they made, consumer radios that they made in the U.S. before they went to having them in Japan. It's pretty nice. It has the speakers also, it's at an angle, so it's partly at the front, partly at the side. It's got a 5-tube circuit, has AM, FM, and 2 shortwave bands with 5 tubes. So it's just a moderate performer on the shortwave bands. Works pretty good on FM. My last thing, all I had to do to it when I got it was replace the filter caps and electrolytic cap and the FM detector circuit. And the FM tube.
How would you rate the performance of that, Gary? How's the sound?
FM, I think it sounds pretty good. It's a transformer chassis, and it's a fairly large speaker, for the size of the set. It was as big a speaker as they could get in there. But this is the top, and the speaker probably sits. Oh, you can't see that well. The speaker probably sits at an angle something like this in the chassis. It's an oval speaker, so it's fairly large. All the other tubes, when I got it, all the tubes are original Hallicrafters. The 16.9 now is no longer. I'm happy to find that the audio tube, which is first audio and audio output combination, I forget the type number. When I looked it up online, how much it costs to replace it if I had to, it was like $50. It's more than I got into the radio. So anyway, it's made in Chicago. That's where Hallicrafters made the U.S. stuff in the day. We also had a little more inexpensive model, the WR2000, which is the same circuit, same chassis, but in a metal cabinet rather than in a walnut cabinet. So that's it. I almost forgot I had it. I suddenly realized at the beginning of this, at the last minute, I had something made in Chicago here to throw. Oh, and I had one more comment. I have another comment about Zenith. navigating into ham radio equipment. They actually did when they purchased Central Electronics in the late 50s. Central Electronics was was an early pioneer of single sideband equipment, and their ultimate equipment was the 100V and the 200V, multi-mode, all broadband tuned tube transmitter. Back in like 59 or so is when it came out. And they were going to have a companion receiver with it, but Zenith pulled the plug on the company and shut them down in sometime in the early to mid 60s or so. I think there was other businesses that they were in that they wanted to keep, but they didn't want the ham radio business. So briefly, Zenith was in the ham radio business when they bought Central Electronics.
Well, thank you for that tidbit. Hey, John, if I may be so bold as to attempt after my last clunky attempt there, could you enable me to share my screen here?
You should be good to go, my friend.
Okay, see, this is, anybody familiar with Echophone?
Hmm?
Echophone is the Hallicrafters.
Oh.
Now, this big dog, this one here, is pretty good size for table radio. You'll be surprised how few tubes it has, 18 wide, 10 high. And this guy has got this thing up for sale. He's done some work on it, but we'll take a peek in the back here. It's in pretty good shape overall. So he stuffed a battery eliminator in there that he probably had, but you can make out that label, Echophone. And if you look down sort of 2/3, 3/4 of the way down, if it was a clearer and bigger shot, it says the Hallicrafters Company. So Hallicrafters not only made some consumer sets, I was very surprised to know that they had actually made some farm battery sets, which to me, you just don't see that many of them anymore. And look at all the room in there. Obviously, it would have been for your battery array. But, you know, I guess you'd have to listen to it. But the fellow who's selling it, well, I don't know why he'd say anything else, claims it's reasonably sensitive, has a pretty good sized speaker in there. So for what it was, not really a bad, radio for somebody who was pre the rural electrification era. And I've got one other little thing here we'll try to show. You'd be remiss in talking about Zenith if you didn't talk about, and you can see it on the tail here, Zenith was big in farm radio. Zenith was also big in wind chargers. And these were kits that, the farmer would get, he would build. He could power up his batteries to do some other stuff too. But Zenith was very much into having complementary products. So if we're gonna, sell these farm radios, we better have some nifty charging. And Sears did the same thing. Silvertone had them. But again, I don't know how much work or what was done on this one, but it's pretty neat. And again, people talk about what goes around comes around. For those who think wind is new, well, really is it? So it was pretty cool. And Zenith also was, I believe, the first company that came up with a foot pedal controlled radio at the insistence of Commander McDonald. If I'm not mistaken, Tom, I think he worked with Ford. I read something about that once, and he actually drove a car up to Ford to show them his device, and they went with it for a little bit. I don't know how long they ran with the thing.
Hudson went with it for about 42 to 47.
Interesting. So it's not just radios. Well, anyway, I'm done with screen sharing. I have nothing left in my book bag for tonight. So whoever might have anything else, story to share, Zenith to show us.
I was going to comment that.
Yes, Tom.
Yeah, two things on Hallicrafters. They, I don't remember the relationship, but Hallicrafters somehow merged with Echophone. Whether they bought them, whether they became
I see.
one. And so if you see some of their early low tube count shortwave receivers, I think they're called like an EC1 or an EC2, something like that. You'd have to look it up. They were sold under the Echophone brand and the Hallicrafters brand. And so over time, they killed the Echophone brand, just sort of like we were talking about earlier with the Central Electronics getting killed by Zenith. The other piece of trivia is, I think in the 60s or 70s, Hallicrafters moved out of Chicago into a suburb here called Rolling Meadows, which is a half an hour, 15 minutes in that neighborhood from my house. And Hallicrafters was bought by Northrop back in the probably late 70s. And of course, it's now Northrop Grumman. And they still make electronic apparatus for the military. I can't tell you what it is because even if I knew it, they'd have to kill me. But my brother worked there for a while. My cousin worked there for a while. Various friends worked there. The interesting thing is they were so close to where Motorola was that engineers bounced between the two companies, because when Northrop would get a big contract, they would pay big money to engineers, and then when the contract was over, they'd fire everybody. So people were a revolving door between Northrop and Motorola. And that had some benefit for Motorola from the viewpoint that they got different experience doing different things, but on the flip side, of course, then you lost some continuity. But that was a pretty common phenomenon back when I worked for them back in the 80s and the 90s.
Know some people at Raytheon, it's still a common phenomenon, so unfortunately. But let's see, George, did you have your hand up?
Hi, yes, I did. Sorry, I had to get my mute off of that thing. Yeah, I was going to show a couple of things. Tom, I used to go out to the RadioFest back when it was in Elgin, and went out with a couple of people actually for several years. It was always known as the Art Deco material. We always found a lot of mirrored stuff, a lot of chrome things. In fact, the Spartan right behind me here is something I bought at Elgin at one of the shows. So always enjoyed it. Always enjoyed the presentations as well. What I was going to mention here is lately I got a lot of Zenith stuff, but this thing is something it's a small radio. As you can see, I can probably pretty much cover it with my hand. It's a K412, and I'm not gonna try and open it. You can see it's got a little handle on the thing where the antenna's in it. The thing that's interesting is it's not battery. It's AC only. And so this whole thing, you had to always, you have the handle, but you better go carry a power cord for it. And it's used like a little cheater cord in the back. I understand they're a bear to work on. I've bought a couple of them that aren't in pieces. It's going to be one of my projects, but these things always seem...
I think the nickname is the Owl.
Yes. Well, there seem to be several owls out there.
They like that style, yes.
Yeah. And but this thing it's got a vernier tuning on the knob. The knobs are different. They're not interchangeable. They're different. This is like a standard 1/4 inch, but this is got concentric tuning, so it's got a very small shaft. So the knobs aren't interchangeable. And of course, the tuning thing is always also missing the indicator. So because there's supposed to be a little arrow to dial this thing in. Now, I'm just going to quickly show you a screen here, if I can, which would be here, and share it. This is the radio. You look at the chassis on this thing, how tight it is. So which is probably what makes it such a bear to work on. So, but you can see it's got all the tubes and it's it's set. It could have been a battery set, but it's not. So, anyways, that was just the.
George, I like the little snippet there. It says, and with almost no waiting for the tubes to heat up. So I'm sure they lasted probably about 2 weeks, taking that jolt every time you turn the thing on. Probably good for the tube resellers,
Yeah, they were battery. I mean, they were battery sets of 1 volt, tubes in there. But so there must be. I haven't even looked at the thing to see, how they dropped the voltage on there. But
I've seen those, and they're not really that bad a performer. You'll be surprised if you ever get one up and running. They sound halfway decent. Anyone else this evening, gentlemen? Mr. Pereira.
Yes, sir. Tom, I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, did you ever have any association with the AWA?
Actually, we are an affiliate of the AWA as of easily 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And on a personal note, since you're a ham, Kleinschmidt teleprinters is my legacy, my great-grandfather's company. And when all you guys went to computers and were throwing away your teleprinters, I was at Hamfest with signs saying, looking for Kleinschmidt product. I ended up with a ton of that stuff. And of course, my son, being my son, said, so Dad, when you die, what do we do with all this stuff? And so I donated the bulk of it to the AWA. In fact, I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. Duncan Brown handles their data communication center. And the brilliance there was he was in the military and worked on Kleinschmidt gear, so he knows more about it than I do. So I had some one-off stuff and things that belonged to my great-grandfather and so on that are all now in that museum, which cleared up some space in my basement, but not as much as I hoped. So just a sidebar.
Thanks, Tom. I also was into teletype a lot, and I had a few Kleinschmidts, but that wasn't a specialty. The other question I have is, did you have club meetings as well as the fests, or were the fests sort of the focus of the club?
Except for RadioFest, we have meetings every 2 months that are physical get-together swap meets, where we have a swap meet, a donation auction, and a business meeting. And the business meeting has kind of got two aspects to it. Part of it's planning RadioFest, because that's kind of a year-round activity. And the other part of it is just general business things of what are we going to do about this or that. Believe it or not, only in about the last 6 years, we actually have a storage locker to put all the junk in for RadioFest. Before that, we were begging and borrowing space all over the place because various members had businesses with a little room in a warehouse or whatever, and we got in the corner of their warehouse, and then we couldn't find the stuff when it came time to get it and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's no rocket science stuff. I'm sure it's, you know, pretty mundane, but yes, we do have a business meeting. And one of the things we're trying to get started on is doing something like what you guys are doing, along with having presentations at our regular every 2-month meeting, because one of the things we need to do to attract new people is start talking to them about radio. You know, it can't just be all of us that have grew up with it and, you know, repaired radios when we were kids. And I don't know about you guys, but I repaired people's color TVs when I was in high school for extra money, because you had to, of course. But, you know, people that are younger than us substantially don't have that experience, because when something breaks, you throw it away and you buy a new one. And so it's a little different mindset. And so that we have to say, you know, by the way, you can't fix this stuff.
Tom, one quick question for you. I noticed on the Archie website, you have a little banner for radio repair, radio television repair. Do you guys do repair clinics, or do you just refer people to club members?
We refer people to club members.
I see.
And it'd be amazing how many people can't see that button. I handle all of the, as you know, all the email and phone calls for the club now. And probably 30% of what I get is, you have somebody that can fix my radio. So then I give them that link and say, well, if you don't find anybody here, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to help you out. And most of the time, that takes care of it. But yeah, people just look for the contact me button and hit the contact me button. And I don't, you know, do anything to make them feel bad about it. It's just a matter of we added that button within the last year, because it used to be under a thing called resources, which was a little bit nebulous. So I said, well, if we put something that's more of a headline, and where one of the first things you read was "fix my radio," press here, it still doesn't work.
Well, you can
obviously, we're not marketing geniuses.
You can chalk that up to the frustrated people, the live person syndrome, you know, for all the people who hate automated telephone systems. So they don't want to click on a link or a button. They want you.
That's right. And that's fine. And I understand.
Yes, Tom, Mr. Pereira has another reaction, comment?
One of the things that I think clubs do very well when they do it is to get an organization or a few people together to help widows of silent keys and collectors who have passed away. And I think that it would be nice to incorporate that into every radio-related club, but it's really a lot of work. I see that we get email notifications about various people who are disposing of stuff, but I think if a club made it known that they would help, it would be very nice for people. I know that in many cases, people come in and just rape the entire collection and leave with everything good. leaving the widow with virtually nothing. And I hate to see that. I wrote a book on telegraph keys, for instance, with the actual price values. And I know there are plenty of radio collectors' guides with price values, and that helps a little bit. But most of the time, the widows have never seen those books. So I wonder if you ever got into that.
Yeah, you know, at least half of the inquiries we get is people trying to figure out what to do with stuff. And to your point, Paul, a big portion of that isn't just widows. It's like, I inherited my uncle's radio collection. I have no idea what to do with it. And so the way I handle it is most people are tech savvy enough that they can send me pictures. And as I said, so I always start out with them if I can to get them to send me pictures, whether it's email or text or however they want to do it. And because my first inkling is to tell them what the gold nuggets are in what they've got. And I'll also be very blunt with them when they have stuff that I can't give away even in a donation auction. But a lot of the things, I don't know if you guys are on any of our subscription lists or the notifications that come out, but a lot of those things that I send out are that situation where somebody inherited something, and I have done, I will call it consultation with them, and basically said, you know, on these items, it's whatever you can get for it. On this one, you know, it should be worth a couple $100. It should be worth whatever it's worth. And there's other times where I'll even tell them if they have something super high end, I said, you need to get this into an auction, not go through what I do because we're a bunch of cheapskates. So even though it's not officially on our website, it's a service we provide regularly.
Very good. Very good. Anybody else with a question, comments,
I got it.
item? Mr. Gibbons.
I'll just throw something in here. It's a little bit of trivia, but it's still something interesting for the Chicago area. I'm going to share my screen here for a moment. And I will have a question for Tom as well. Share.
By the way, am I following the right protocol here? Was there some way I'm supposed to trigger you to say I want to talk or something? I can't see anything that says raise your hand here.
No, you're doing absolutely fine.
All right, because I don't want to everybody go, boy, he was a pain in the neck.
No, this is great. You're really great. So you look at this and you say, well, that's not a Zenith. I do have a Zenith TO, by the way, in my collection, but what the triviality I thought I'd bring up here is that this is a Nordmende Tannhäuser. This was their flagship radio from 1957. But what's special about this? This is really a Sterling Nordmende Tannhäuser. Turns out that Sterling in Chicago was the importer for Nordmende radios. So you can see the dial face is much simpler. It's more satisfactory for the US where shortwave was prevalent but not used as often. Whereas you have, you know, the AM band, of course, the FM band right here, and it was the full US spectrum. But what makes it a little bit interesting is because they were located in Chicago, Illinois, is it's a little bit atypical because most of the German manufacturers imported into New York, like Telefunken came in through Manhattan and Long Island City, and also Olympic was the importer for Liva Opta. So there's a little bit of Chicago in those world of German radios, and of course there's quite a German population. Of course, Tom, your last time being quite German is, you know, there is a little bit of Chicago in these German imports. And
may I ask you, John, when you got that radio, was that little Sterling emblem on there? I mean, what are the chances? That's amazing. I mean, I'm lucky if I can get, you know, the Zenith emblem still on.
I'm pretty lucky there because this radio that I just showed, there's a couple of things. Well, the Sterling radio, the badge, like Nordmende, sometimes you see the Sterling, it would say Sterling Nordmende on the entire metal badge on the bottom of the radio. But on these, on certain ones, they did the badge on the grill cloth. And what's interesting is that like that radio I just showed is original in its original condition. That the cabinet is actually in phenomenal shape. It's also probably the heaviest radio in my collection. I call it the Tannhäuser because, you know, that's going to break your back when you pull that baby up because it's nice. It's got that solid, thick wood, and there's plenty of brass on that. This is sort of the zenith of the era when the Germans put in a lot of high-end materials, and then they had to start cheapening the product because of just competitive pressure. by the late 50s and early 60s, you could see they were still well made, but the materials were not quite as ornate as they were in the mid 50s. And I'd say 57 was about the zenith, and they started dialing back, so to speak. But yeah, that was really interesting that I only came to learn, not that long ago, that there was an import source for George Menda, and that was with the Sterling badge. Anyway, actually, I had a question for Tom. Just from your perspective, you made a really interesting point about the younger crowd not really. They're only interested in aesthetics, not really on an actual radio or what it was all about. Has there? I know it's probably maybe taboo with some people if they're purists, but has anyone sort of tried to suggest adding like Bluetooth to some of these radios to add a little bit of life to them and make people appreciate so that they want to have radio they can, or they can stream through an old radio as sort of the compromise?
I've got, a couple of examples. We have a couple of younger people that joined our group that exactly want to do that. And of course, you can do it by hacking the whole radio up, or you can do it very tastefully and not destroy the radio.
Right.
And I just had a guy that's, probably in his late 50s come by with two Philco cathedrals that he wants me to repair. And then he called me 2 days later and said, I want Bluetooth on both of them, so I'm giving one to each one of my kids. So I'll make the radio fully functional, and my plan is I'll put a toggle switch in the back so you can switch between Bluetooth and AM, with the notion that whenever I do stuff like that, I always try and find existing holes on the chassis and just add some hardware so you can reverse the whole thing.
Right.
And I haven't done it yet, but that is on the plate. So yeah, it seems like a Bluetooth kind of thing is got some traction. And I've watched some YouTube videos where people have absolutely destroyed radios to make what they're calling a Bluetooth speaker.
Yes.
You guys may have seen the same thing, where they have a speaker facing forward through the old grill cloth and one facing out the back. Now, how that can be stereo, I'm not sure how that works, but they basically stripped the chassis and put all the Bluetooth stuff on the chassis, which is really all around unnecessary. But fortunately, they're doing it to radios nobody cares about.
I cannot remember the name of the outfit, but I was searching for a particular set online, and I saw what I thought was a very nicely restored model of this particular, it might have been a Silvertone, and I followed the link from the picture that I had just got, and it was a business, and I believe he's in New York. And basically what the guy does is he does nice cabinet work. He puts in a nice fresh grill. I mean, he really does a beautiful job. The radios are very attractive, but essentially what he does is make it into, a player. He does not, you cannot use the set for, broadcast or shortwave. So he's, it's a repurposer, and I know that's a bad thing, but he sells them for a nice chunk of change, and he seems to be, not suffering for want of customers. So, it puts things in front of people's eyes, whether or not they would ever take the next step and try to appreciate it for a little bit of more of what it is debatable. But is it better than the dumpster? I don't know. Those are the conversations you can have late into the night, I guess.
Well, the same issue exists with like McMurdo Silver radios with the 18-inch Jensen speakers in it. The audio guys want the 18-inch Jensen speaker, and they just soon throw away the rest of it.
Yeah. Well.
And in fact, the guy that had this job before me, Art Bilski, moved to Florida, and he had to downsize to move to Florida, and he had a Masterpiece 4. And he said right in his ad, will not separate the speaker from the radio. I'm selling you the whole thing as a radio, and I expect that the buyer is interested in having a radio, or I won't sell it. And he did find somebody eventually, but it took longer because obviously it's a
good for ours.
I have to say that I had someone contact me. They ended up having a 25 tube Stratosphere in their barn that actually, I guess part of it had been buried under the dirt. And they wanted to know what the value of the speaker and the amplifier would be. They were going to break it apart and see if they could, sell it. I got a hold of someone that I know to go down. It was down in Virginia. He literally had to dig it out, and he had to offer him, what he thought the speaker and the amp would be worth. And he ended up going back with a good Strat, all intact. But it was going to be separated and,
Yep.
go to the wind.
Yeah, radio rescue. You should show up in an ambulance, with a clipboard and
Ah,
don't do it, doctor. You only think you know what you're doing.
And we have to
These
get-
beautiful World War II walkie-talkies, beautiful, about a 5-tube superhead receiver in there. People used to take these apart and put a CB radio inside them.
oh,
The pain. Yes, Hugh. Got his hand up.
Yeah, so I've contemplated doing the Bluetooth thing with a toggle switch to one of my Telefunken radios that has a bunch of speakers in it. And the speaker out back, by the way, might have been a subwoofer. You want that next to the wall to sort of, but who knows? So I sat down tonight going Chicago. All you radio guys, are going to blow me away with Chicago. I carry the burden of the vintage electronic side of things here a lot of nights, not having much for radio collection. But I thought about it and I said, I know what I have from Chicago. I have 3 Hammond tone wheel organs in my house.
wow.
Those were made in Chicago.
Very nice.
Yeah, and they're all, somehow I got the notion a few years ago that I wanted to, make some tone wheel organs work, and that turned into people saying to me, I know where there's a Hammond C3 in a basement. Do you want it? So my garage has these 2 giant church cabinet organs in it, and then I have a smaller one in the living room.
and you have the matching Leslie speaker too?
I do have a Leslie speaker. I have a solid state one too, but I have a real 142 or whatever that is as well. And they've all seen a hard life. The Leslie speaker's missing the back wood because people took that off. It made it louder, I guess. I don't know if any of the folks here know how those work. They were called tone wheel organs, and Hammond made clocks in, I guess, the early 30s, because he knew how to make a motor that synchronized with the line frequency. And the story I heard, I'm not 100% sure it's the right one, but it'll do for an anecdote, is that he had some guy showed up with a patent on using the synchronous speed motor for clocks. So he had to figure out what he wanted to do with his motor that would turn precisely. And what he ended up doing was turning this big long shaft with all different size gears on it and different teeth numbers. And there are magnetic pickups on each one of those. And that's how the tones are made.
Very
That's
nice.
the source of the tone. And Jimmy Smith, Greg Allman and Booker T and the MGs and all those guys playing Hammond organs. So there you go. One of these days,
Thank you, Hugh.
I'm gonna get in there.
I have a couple of Leslie speakers in my barn, and when those things rotate and you pump a lot of audio through them, it's pretty amazing experience.
Yes, it is fun. Oh, that's cool.
They were in the back corner at an AWA flea market about 4 or 5 years ago, and nobody even looked at them. And what are these multiple speakers that are on a wheel? I couldn't figure out what that was, so just had to take those home. And you got to have a barn or a church in order to really enjoy them.
Yeah. Oh, a lot of bands still use that stuff. It's very popular. Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
We could talk afterwards if. But whatever, there's definitely a following for those, and some companies that, professionally restore them for hard road use. But, maintain the tube amp and, all of the features, rubber bands and motors and 2 speeds and all this stuff going on in there. So.
Now, Tom, I know you're located outside the city, and I don't expect you to be, a complete historical resource here, so no pressure, but I'm just curious. So, as I cruise around sometimes online, you'll go down the rabbit hole. So, I was looking at various things for Zenith, and then I'm on Commander McDonald's. Then I'm down on Dickens Avenue in Chicago. I'm looking at factories. And then I found some more recent photographs, but the guy didn't tag them with years. And apparently there is still a company, and I don't know if it's Japanese or Korean, that owns the Zenith name. And they had found some older buildings. It wasn't the main factory that Zenith had, but they were Zenith buildings, graffitied windows knocked out. I mean, real, urban renewal candidates, for lack of a better term. And, I guess, the question the guy who was collecting these pictures was posing, what's left, what's in there? And I guess he made a reconnaissance at one point, and there were, he could identify papers, files, desks. So he's starting, what's the history in there? And I think somebody actually approached this electronics company as to whether, would you let us go in there and remove anything that may be of some historical value for either the city or for Zenith or for Commander McDonald, and was told, no thanks. We don't want the trouble. But is there some Zenith real estate still left in Chicago that's old, that's just abandoned?
The answer is probably, and
Probably,
of
okay.
course, the
So I wasn't completely on.
I can give you a couple of pieces of information which relate but aren't the same. LG owns the Zenith brand. The last time I saw anything with the Zenith brand on it was in hospital televisions. So institutional stuff, they were using Zenith as a second-tier brand. I haven't seen that in a long time. The Zenith headquarters moved from the city to the suburbs to a place called Glenview, again, 20 minutes away from me. And they had built the building as an engineering and research and development center, as well as the corporate headquarters, with the intent that they were going to expand on this property. They had a ton of acreage. And over time, they sold off the acreage and never built anything but the original building. And when LG took over, they closed that facility. The facility was either bought or rent by Aon Insurance, AON. And the adjacent, we have a huge family-owned appliance store business that's been around since 1936 called ABT, ABT. They've been in that general area forever. They have a monster store. They sell on the internet all over the country. And what they did is they bought the Zenith property and knocked down the high-rise. And I mentioned my friend worked at Zenith designing black and white TVs. He worked in that facility. And he said that was such a purpose-built building to go do electronic development that redoing it to do anything else was not going to ever be a clean proposition. So there's just a sign out front that says, expanding soon, Apt Electronics. So that's that piece of it. The other thing I wanted to go back to is I was in the Hammond organ factory about 20 years ago, and it had been converted into an antiques mall. I don't know what it is now or if it's still there. A buddy of mine's father worked for Hammond Organ. That's the thing about Chicago. All these companies you find, through 3 steps or 4 steps away, you can find somebody that worked at one of these places back when. Just the answer to your question is out doing some homework. I don't know what still exists. There are some, as in any large city, there's some really blighted areas that probably have buildings that people haven't bothered to tear down, and it's probably, facilities from all these various radio companies.
Who knows? Does anybody else have a question or comment for Tom? We try to keep these at about an hour and a half, and we're coming up on our witching hour here, so.
Maybe
Well,
just
go right ahead, John, sorry.
just throw a question to Tom. Is Tom, for membership in your club, what is, have you been able to keep it level, or what do you see as you have struggle in maintaining memberships, or especially with trying to attract new, younger crowds?
Well, the attracting a younger crowd is the tougher issue. And of course, people don't tend to get into collectible things till they're in their late 40s anyway. I mean, finding people in their 20s, they're generally busy doing other stuff like life. And so we do get some growth in that area. One of the things is we're kind of invisible during this COVID thing. You guys were smart enough to put together, these Zoom meetings. All we've got is our newsletter to communicate with people and emails that I send out. And the emails go beyond our membership. So when I send out one of these announcement emails, it goes to over 600 people. Well, we don't have 600 members. We probably have a couple of hundred members. But, we have various affiliations and various other people that have worked with us. And so, part of it's the value proposition. The newsletter is one thing. If you want to sell at RadioFest, for anybody who did, you have to become a member of the club. But, and of course, to go to the talks, you have to be a member and a few other things. But the amount of things you really need to be a member for to be involved with us is pretty limited. And so, you know, we're hoping that once we start doing a Zoom thing like you're doing and do a show and tell like you're doing or whatever it's going to be. In fact, we're having our first
I will take it to
strategy meeting on that tomorrow, because my notion at least is that, you know, this should carry on even when COVID's gone, because I think we get a different audience or people that are, you know, not able to attend for whatever reason. You know, last month when I was on with you guys, or 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry, we had the gentleman that was someplace warm, you know, sitting on the beach talking to us, and that wouldn't happen if you had just a gotta show up slot meet, right? So I think, you know, being a little more virtual may pay off for us, and you guys have to let me know how it goes for you.
Well, keep in touch. Keep in touch. We're you know where to find us, and you can always get Jim, who does your website. You know, Mr. Ratchkovic, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So you can always ask Jimmy. He has all my contact info, and you know, if you need technical help, I'm sure John would be willing to answer some questions. Or Bruce
sure.
and Tom. Bruce really gave this thing its start with us, but we'll be happy to talk after you guys talk a little bit about putting one of those together.
Very good. Thank you.
You know, what we should
And
really do
Tom-
is the most frightening thing is to all get on a bus after COVID and come out and see you guys, and you can buy us all an old style beer. Can you still get an old style beer in Chicago?
I think so, but I won't.
The world is coming to an end if you can't. That was a local favorite for years and years and years out there, I remember. But who knows? Probably gone the way of
We
Zenith.
have a lot of microbreweries around, like you probably do. So.
Oh, yeah.
We'll find something with suds on the top for you.
All right, it's a deal. We'll have a virtual cold one.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
I was just going to make a quick comment that these Zoom meetings, at least for me, I go to the club swap meets and stuff like that, but you often get so tied up with, you know, trying to, you know, deal with your table, doing whatever. You don't get a chance to really get to meet people and talk. And I'm finding this very enjoyable and a different experience than just, you know, the club, you know, swap meets. So I just thought I'd pass it on.
No, you're exactly right. You know, one thing you can say about Archie is we're a very transactional club. If you know, everything else is secondary to the hot deal and people running around going, look what I found. And in this environment, that isn't the case. And so we can get into a guest speaker, let's say, like you've had in the past, or I mean, New Jersey, I guess, did that. By the way, as a sidebar, my friend Bill sat in on the New Jersey Zoom meeting, which they simulcast on YouTube, and it's still on YouTube right now. And of course, they run the thing from end to end, so it's like 4 hours long. But like the last hour and a half was just an open mic thing, so people can just talk to each other. But apparently, there's a 1 hour or about 45 minutes to an hour talk by a fellow who's an expert on the RCA AR88, and I guess it was quite a good presentation. So that's another option. We could make use of some of our presenters and have them put together a webinar, so to speak, in the Zoom format.
No, I mean, we'd be happy to lend you anybody. Like, not to say Tom Pereira comes to mind because he's got he's a prolific presenter. But if there was somebody you felt might have been of interest, let us know. Vice versa, you know, we can share these and hopefully make them as well as sort of a you know, a little bit of as George was saying, a meet and greet. We can also have a presentation or a little knowledge shared. You know, have a Thursday night at the movies as well as getting to know you type event. So. Very good. Well, Tom, thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it a great deal. Say hi to everybody in Chicagoland.
Thank you.
Yeah.
June 25th, another one in the books, John.
Yeah. By the way, I will post, in fact, Tom, you will be on we do have a YouTube site, so I will be posting this in the next few days, by the weekend, probably, on our club YouTube site. I apologize. I started about 30 seconds late because I didn't hit the record button until, Tom, you joined, and then I had a brain freeze, so I forgot to hit the record button. So for the first like 15, 20 seconds is missed, but it's very little. But this will be all on here for your record in case you want to watch yourself.
Yeah, you know what else I could do, Tom, is I can send a link to our YouTube site out to Jimmy if he wants to put it on the Archie site. If anybody else is interested in hearing, you know, what we think, which is really probably not much of anything about Zenith compared to the experts.
If you can copy me on it, what I want to do is get people to start thinking about this sort of thing, so I can send out a couple of links that says, here's what some other clubs are doing, thought you'd be interested.
Very good.
And that might be worth a way to get this kickstarted a little bit.
And Tom, did you see our Zoom Fest link?
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yes.
saw that. Okay.
Yeah, yes. I think you directed that to me the last meeting. And I did see that on your website.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, very good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks all for coming down, and we'll see you. We'll keep you posted as far as we're trying to keep it on the bi-weekly. If schedules dictate, we may have just a week's interregnum here between Zooms, but we'll let everybody know in the IO group.
Thanks a lot.
All right, gentlemen. Take care. Good night.
Right.
Good night.
Yeah, everyone have a good week.
Bye-bye. Thanks
Bye.
again, Tom.
Bye-bye.